I would like you to think about the future for a moment, to picture it in your mind's eye. You might have pictured this, or even this. But regardless what your vision of the future looks like, chances are you have a lot of uncertainty about the future and how it will play out. And that uncertainty can make us feel a bit nervous about what the future will bring. It can make you feel powerless to direct the future, and with all the challenges facing society, may make you feel pretty overwhelmed. If we are to create a future that supports healthy people and healthy oceans, it is critical that we get past those feelings of powerlessness and of being overwhelmed. We need to take targeted actions to create a more desirable future. So how can we do that? The process of developing scenarios directly exploring future uncertainty can help us create a vision or a narrative of the future that acts as a mobilizing force. What do I mean by that? Well, scenarios focus on what the future could look like, and these scenarios can then be used to explore how we might achieve a desirable future, providing a way to direct targeted action at individual, community, national and international level to achieve the future we want. A key component of this scenario development approach is the production of a shared vision of the future. I'm fairly certain at the beginning when I asked you all to picture the future, you each pictured something slightly different. Your individual picture was shaped by your worldview, your knowledge, your culture, background, and so on. Creating shared visions of the future leverages the powers of individuals and communities' experiences to develop a future that reduces inequalities and maximizes opportunities for different parts of society. So how is all this discussion of the future relevant to today's session? It's relevant because we can use all the research, action, success stories and practical application we have heard about today to inform visions of the future that support ocean and human health. A future that we can then go out and actually achieve. This is the inspiration for Future Seas, a project coordinated by the Centre for Marine Socioecology, involving over 100 researchers, which has explored potential futures for the world's oceans in relation to 12 grand challenges. These future scenarios look at what we could achieve over the UN Decade of Ocean Science for Sustainable Development. So what the world could look like by 2030. For each of these grand challenges, we explored a business-as-usual future, informed by current trends, looking at the future we're currently heading towards. We've also explored a technically possible, more sustainable future that describes what the future could look like if we used all the knowledge and technology we currently have at our fingertips, or is emerging. So all the research you've heard about so far in the talks today. The difference between these two futures is reliant on human choices, behaviour, values, policy, and so on. And I really want to emphasise that these futures we developed are not supposed to be prediction of the future. Rather, they are plausible trajectories for society into the future and are informed by available evidence. But imagining a future we all want isn't enough. We need to work out how we can actually achieve that future. So a second step in the Future Seas project has been working out what actions we need to take to achieve the future we want. How can we create a roadmap to a desirable future? As I mentioned, we explored the future in relation to 12 grand challenges facing the ocean. And one of these was addressing feedbacks between ocean health and human health. You might remember from Laurie's talk that she discussed risks and opportunities in relation to the links between human health and the ocean. We explored how we can minimise these risks or undesirable interactions between ocean and human health, and how we can maximise opportunities or desirable interactions. To explore uncertainty how the future may play out, we explored 5 drivers of change. These are factors that we as a society have the potential to influence and will have a high impact on how feedbacks between ocean and human health play out in the future. You'll see that these drivers echo much of the work that you've heard about this morning so far. How we make decisions and change people's behaviour, who has power and agency to affect change, human development and industry, our food system, and that's both on land and in the sea, and our lifestyle and connection to the oceans. Based on these drivers, we developed 2 scenarios. The business-as-usual scenario we called command and out of control, and the more sustainable scenario, which we called living and connecting. I'm not going to go through all the features of these scenarios right now, but to give you a flavour, I'm going to describe a few examples of their contrasting aspects. First of all, if we focus on behaviour change initiatives. In our business as usual world, these tend to focus on changing the behaviour of the individual, whereas in our more sustainable world, they focus on change at a community level. So why is this? Outcomes of individual level campaigns don't reliably drive long-term behaviour change at a population level. This is because it tends to emphasise individualist rather than communal ideals, and it may stigmatise individuals who are unable to change their behaviour, leading to increased marginalisation. Whereas community approaches will help develop community cohesion and build social capital, which are really critical for supporting the resilience of communities to cope with change in the oceans and in respect to their own health. Next, in our business as usual future, connection to the oceans is weak, and there are barriers to increasing this connection. Whereas in our more sustainable future, connection to the ocean is actually enabled. For example, you have heard from Chris about surf therapy. Well, another example is that of improving the quality of life of breast cancer survivors. Rather than having individual, isolated recovery programs, fly fishing camps are now being used to build a sense of community, provide gentle exercise that minimises the strengthening exercises physicians give to those recovering from surgery, and creates a sense of community. The third example is that in the business as usual scenario, the economic system is still very much focused on growth and a linear economy with considerable waste. In contrast, a more sustainable 2030, the policies and actions are more focused on building a balanced, circular economy. So what might this look like? Steel is essential for a range of industries, including shipbuilding. Over 1.5 billion tonnes of steel are produced each year, and this process requires approximately 800 million tonnes of coal each year. This has implications for climate change with knock-on effects for human health. In contrast, in Sustainable 2030, incentives that support environmental engineering solutions are starting to predominate. For example, green steel, which uses old tyres instead of coking coal in the steel-making process. So in this example, we're focused on reducing undesirable impacts between society and the oceans, and this in turn has the potential to reduce negative impacts of the ocean on human health. So I have described what a more desirable future might look like for delivering healthy oceans and healthy people. But how can we actually achieve that future? We're going to need significant and transformational action to meet this goal. So we also explored a potential roadmap to that future, identifying over 80 actions that would help us achieve a future where we're maximising ocean health and human health and the interactions between them. I won't go through all the actions, but they can be split into 4 key strategies that could be implemented over the next decade. The first is science and health communication. These programmes could be implemented on quite a short-term timescale. These programmes could range from formal training initiatives focused on improving ocean literacy among different stakeholder groups, through to targeted public health programmes. And there are a range of different ways they could be achieved. But regardless of the approach used, we really need to incorporate a clear understanding of the values, beliefs and worldviews held in different sectors of society so as to develop more effective communication campaigns. The second is knowledge exchange. So what do I mean by that? It focuses on the two-way exchange of knowledge among different stakeholders. And when done successfully, knowledge exchange is linked to both social learning and development of capacity from individual to organisational levels. And these are really needed to achieve the type of transformational change necessary to move towards the more sustainable future I've described. I also want to emphasise that these knowledge exchange initiatives can occur in a really diverse array of settings, not just between scientists and the public, but rather among different segments of the public. In the second half of the UN Decade of Ocean Science, we propose a greater focus on 2 strategies that we call incentives and rules and regulations. So these are strategies that directly guide individual, community and business behaviours that impact on both ocean and human health. For example, through the modification of industry practices. Well, what we suggest is that in order to implement the incentives and regulation-based strategies, it is essential that we first have successful implementation of the first 2 strategies, so communication and knowledge exchange, as these are necessary to help develop this sort of intrinsic motivation we needed to engage with both incentives and regulations. So what do I mean by these incentives and regulation-based strategies? Incentives can be provided by the government, such as tax incentives to provide food to the domestic rather than the export market. Whereas regulations can affect the behaviour of resource users very directly through economic, social and fiscal policy and through a variety of other rules. For instance, stronger regulation around recycling, reuse and reduction of waste as an important example of how we could aim towards this living and connecting future. Today I have given you a whistle-stop tour through one possible set of futures for feedback between ocean health and human health, and a roadmap of how we might achieve the more sustainable of those futures. But where does that leave us? The next time you think about the future and how it will play out, I challenge you to view the future with hope and to work with others to develop a shared vision of the ocean we need for the future we want. Thank you very much.